now. So welcome everybody to our online session with Yan Wang Preston and Iris Sikking. I'm very happy that you both are here, and I'm very happy that we can have this talk thanks to the Confucius Institute in Heidelberg. And yes, and we will get to find out more about the exhibitions of Iris Sikking, curator of the Biennale für aktuelle Fotografie 22, and of course of Yan Wang Preston's work, Forest, which is shown in the Kunsthalle Mannheim in the exhibition Contested Landscapes. I'm very much looking forward to this. And now I want to hand over to Heidi Marweg and the Confucius Institute.
Thank you very much, Jasmin Meinecke, for your kind words. Good evening. I'm Heidi Marweg and on behalf of Confucius Institute Heidelberg as cooperation partner of Biennale für aktuelle Fotografie, I also would like to welcome all of you to tonight's artist talk with Yan Wang Preston and Iris Sikking. It's a pleasure to have you, Dr. Wang Preston, and Iris, to have you and you, Iris Sikking, here tonight. I promise I will be brief, because I myself am curious about the talk to come between artist and curator. I'm looking forward to seeing the artist's work, Forest, shown at Kunsthalle Mannheim, and I'm sure so do you. Please give me only one more second. Thank you to the whole Biennale team for the excellent cooperation, and of course, many thanks to Iris Sikking and Yan Wang Preston. And now, let's start.
It's my turn, I guess. I thought for a second that Jasmin was going to say something again, but sorry. All right, then I have to share my screen, actually. Thank you very much, both, in the meantime, for your wonderful and kind introductions. The talk, the hour that we have doesn't allow us to give a broad overview of the Biennale für aktuelle Fotografie. So I just say a few words about the exhibition Contested Landscapes that is in the Kunsthalle Mannheim, still on show till almost the end of May this year. Contested Landscapes is about the value of nature. It is about the ecological challenges we are facing these days, or this area, 21st century. Nature is seen as a resource for growth, and the economical value of nature seems much, much higher than its ecological value. I have selected 8 artists here from different countries, from different internationalities, and they reflect and address the soul, about the soul leftovers of pristine nature, if at all we can talk about those spots anymore, if there are still wild spots of nature around the globe. And they talk about how we as humans construct the nature to our needs and use it under our own conditions. Yan Wang Preston, and here you have an exhibition view, is then of course one of the selected artists in this exhibition. And in Forest, she investigates the relocation and planting of old and new trees in China. And this is part of a nationwide ecological strategy to green the cities, to create patches of nature in the immediate living environment of the citizens, which is of course quite important. And some biographical information on for Yan Wang, about Yan Wang. Last year, she has been chosen as one of the 100 heroines in the selection, as a selection of the Royal Photographic Society in the UK. And this initiative wants to identify the careers and the works of outstanding female photographers from around the globe, whose works are transforming photography and visual arts. Before Yan Wang Preston moved to the UK in 2005, that was in 2005, she worked as an anesthetist, and in England she completed an MA in photography, a master in photography in Bradford, and later on a PhD about her Mother River project. And currently she lectures at the University of Huddersfield. I have become to know Yan Wang Preston as a very dedicated visual artist who not only makes stunning images, but also opens up unknown worlds for us and asks very urgent questions about topics of today via her extended research practice. I would like now to hand over to Yan Wang and give her the possibility to share the screen to do an introduction to her work. And then I will share my screen again and we will go into more detail and speak about, while speaking about some of the images of the forest project.
Well, thank you, Iris, and thank you for the festival and the Confucius Institute for hosting the exhibition and my talk. Is really a huge honor, because when I received the very first email from Iris, I was so excited, because contested landscapes is precisely what I do. So Iris and I will be talking about forest much more in details in about 15 minutes time. And I thought I'd take this opportunity to just give you a little bit overview of what I do as a photographer and a visual artist, so that you can see how forest sits into this. So I'll try to share my screen. Okay, so obviously the talk is dedicated to one of my projects called Forest, and this is actually the book cover of for the project, which is published by a German publisher, Hutchkins. So also I think it's you know, it's so far the largest exhibition for forest in Germany. It's about time, because the book was released in 2018. But as a photographer, my career really, well, I shall say my identity change from a medical doctor to a photographer happened in 2005 when I moved to England and decided to call myself a photographer. Looking back, I feel like I'm just about to leave the first stage of my career and enter perhaps a mid-career stage. And looking back, I can see that there are consistent ways of working and interests that have always been my work. So I would say my work is always interested in landscape as a physical being, but also as a representation. I'm very interested in how landscape can be connected with politics. Politics does not mean only who sits as a prime minister, you know, but it's more about, you know, who's making this landscape, for whom. But also I think, you know, by extension, when you are interested in landscape nowadays, you can't ignore the environment and ecology. For me personally, it's also very much to do with the sense of identity. So for example, actually I only did a few projects, less than a handful, since 2005. My first, I would say, formal project was very easy to describe. I photographed the entire Yangtze River in China at a precise 100-kilometer intervals. This is a project that's very easy to describe, but epic and a kind of a nightmare to do because the river is 6,211 kilometers long. And so if you see Y1, you know, the altitude is 5,400 meters above the sea level. That is 600 meters higher than the summit of Mont Blanc. That's our reference point here. So that that means it has only half of the oxygen level we have here, and it's totally remote. I was told, an official record, I was probably the third non-Tibetan woman to reach the source of the Yangtze River. And so, you know, it's a logistic nightmare, and it's expedition more than photography often. I kind of just about did it, but it was my grow-up project, I suppose. You know, obviously I can't share everything with you, about that project, but you can find a lot of information on my website, including many short films. And, the project became an overview really about contemporary China because the river traverses the entire width of China, from Tibet, the almost pristine wilderness, to Shanghai, the postmodern city. Only a few example pictures. Very different. You can see the way the river is changing. This is already very close to Shanghai. I think with this, I very much adopted quite a storytelling strategy, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, because I could not choose my location to photograph. And this became a book, also published by Hutchins, my second book, and a series of exhibitions. Started off with quite a few really large ones in China. And I think because the critical edge really of the project sits in the Chinese context, because it's not meant to be totally environmental. It's about landscape and identity, which is why it's called Mother River, because the river landscape represents China. And so I was, for example, criticized by some visitors. They would say, how dare you portray our beautiful and grand Mother River this way? And but then again, even the director of, for example, Wuhan Art Museum, who lived all his life by the river, would say, I lived here all my life, but I have not seen the whole river in this way. So that's just a very quick overview on Mother River. And I kind of want to highlight something, which is the fact that when I make work, I don't just see myself as a kind of observational photographer. Some of my work will adopt that strategy in the final presentation, but some will not. And particularly in the research stage, it's very hands-on. As you can see, this is hands down. So this was at one of the source areas of the Yangtze River. I made a red circle on the frozen headwater. So it's pretty much performance-based. I want to tell you this because this leads to what I'm doing in England now. So that way of a very systematic method seemed to be always there in Mother River. And in a current project, I'm developing my first formal project, I suppose, that I'm developing in England. This one is very different because it's not linear. I will explore many directions at the same time, but also to do with how the sense of national identity is connected with its pictorial representation, but also its ecological management. So I choose rhododendron to observe. Rhododendron is a foreign species in the UK. If foreign sounds fairly neutral, then most of the time it's commonly called a non-native and invasive species. And I found that very interesting, the very casual pairing. Why does it have to be non-native and invasive? So as someone who's not native here, I obviously picked on this. So when I decided to really dig into this, the first thing I did was to commit to walk to and to photograph one rhododendron bush every other day for an entire year. Now you can see the obsession still there. And because I wanted to open myself up and to throw my body into the landscape over the 4 seasons and see what I can learn from that. And the result, this is one of the pieces I made, my first kind of visual audio installation called With Love from an Invader. Obviously, that's because the shape of that bush is a love heart. I thought it was a heart when my daughter said, "Oh, mommy, that looks like a love heart." So the name came. And it also has an original soundtrack I made. I'm quite proud here with my collaborator, Monty Atkins. We've already released a CD. And so we used almost entirely the sound samples we collected locally. And, that became a 4-panel installation to really present what I found over this year. And, we also found a lot of animals. And so animal footage became part of the installation. And with that, another example of this kind of quite embodied ways of working, I selected another very small rhododendron to not only observe, I wanted to play with its materials. I wanted to see what we can, or I can generate in terms of ideas and work by engaging with its materials. So I started in the autumn of 2020. And the first thing I did was to collect all of its falling autumn leaves. I was originally inspired by the beauty. And, yes, it's a lot more than just being non-native and invasive, yeah. It can be seen in other ways. And so this became another kind of labor-intensive work because I didn't realize such a small rhododendron shrub, about my size, generated probably around 5,000 red leaves in one winter. So it became a 6-meter scroll, and you can't quite get the sense on the screen, but I'll show you the detail. So this is the detail. So it's a very much a layered image of, I think, 6 layers, because I had to work this over 3 months, because the leaves don't fall overnight. They do it gradually. And yeah, it goes on like this. And this is how it's presented at the moment in Jeddah photo. It's obviously has it's got a strong reference to the kind of sense of time embedded in Chinese traditional philosophy. So I think with this body of work, I did autumn and obviously winter. You can see behind me. I set fire to the seed pods. So I think from working like this, I actually worked out my relationship to the landscape here, or my position within. I think that was really important for me, because I feel like I'm never photographing something. I'm photographing the relationship between me and this thing. And I now happily occupy the position of a foreigner. But I think that's a very good position, because I have reference points to at least 2 directions, and I can make work from this quite rich and fertile ground. So forest really sits alongside Mother River and with love from an invader. Forest is also a very long-term project. It took me 7 years to complete. I didn't think it was going to take that long to start off with. I started by taking pictures like this. I started by walking around the city. In 2011, I did a residency in Chongqing, which was right in the middle of the Yangtze River, one of the largest cities in the world with 30 million people. And I saw very strange things, like very large trees wrapped in gigantic plastic bags. This is strange here, because really they need to breathe. And then you see, again, fairly old trees already, mature trees, just stopped alongside the roadside. And this road was not even completed yet, but the trees were already in place. And clearly they seem to have difficulties standing for themselves. They were always supported. And later I also saw the root ball, which normally is only this size. That's why they needed the support. And you can see the blue bags. So they are nutrition drips, literally like the drips we would receive in the hospital, with a needle stabbed in the back. And these scenes really made me stop. I just could, at first, I literally had a very strong emotional reaction. That did not look like forest to me. That looked like a battlefield. So I started taking pictures. And, I had many questions at the time. So what's happening here? Whose trees were they? Where did they come from? And are they going to survive? And clearly there was a big industry going on, a thriving industry. So somebody's making a lot of money, with whose money? So, you know, these were the questions I thought would be nice to find out more. And, you know, the two things, a very old tree and a brand new city environment, they don't seem to add up there. And so over the next few years, I began to gradually, you know, deepen my investigation. You know, I did some kind of branching out this way. For example, I asked myself, what does forest mean? Because clearly all those transplanting took place because China had a policy. Many cities had their policies to green the city. But forest could mean the intensity of the city environment. So I took a series of pictures like this. I have not really published them because I somehow felt maybe that's not enough. And then I also thought about the crowds, you know, because this is kind of quite common in China. Could this be a metaphor, visual metaphor for forests? But after a range of trials, I decided to come back to trees, because I realized actually there's enough for me to dig into just with trees. Let's focus on trees and trees alone. And I had a strategy which was to, normally I could only start by photographing them after they are transplanted. So I try to find the kind of woodland or single trees after they have just been put there. So they haven't got leaves yet. That would be the starting point. And so, for example, this picture was taken in 2011. And then I asked myself, considering I live in England, what do I do? I go to China once or twice a year. So another very practical, but it turned out to be a very powerful strategy was to repeat the photo. It sounds very, you know, natural, but it took me a while to work that one out. And so this was the same trees 2 years later in 2013. And at the time, the answer was still not clear, like, would they survive or not? Clearly, they were being cared for. And this was the last picture I took for this woodland in 2017. That was quite a surprise, because the trees did grow. Some perished, but in this small woodland, I think 2/3 actually survived. You know, ecologists would say that they will not live as long as usual, but they are strong, they are adapting, they even had fruits when I visited. So that was a really big lesson to learn. You know, I could have carried on taking pictures of half-dead trees. After 3 pages of the book, which is a book, and then you get the story, but I felt I let the trees, it's like a tree-led approach, eh? So this series also became a book, which tells, I think, a quite dialectic story of the deforestation in China. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to let Iris to continue.
Thank you so much, Yan. Just sharing my screen first, because multitasking is still quite hard. Yes, there we are. I suppose you can all see my shared screen. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jan, for your wonderful introduction, and also to give the context of your practice, a wider context, wider insight in your practice, and then to see how this forest project sits in that. And wonderfully, something that you just said, a tree-led approach, if I understood that correctly. It's really great. And I also think it taps into the first slide that I have up here. This is the story of Frank. And when I spoke to you in the last 1.5 years about your project, there were some keywords that returned, and that I think that we can talk about via these two pictures. And the two most important keywords, let's say, were the physical empathy. You already described that as the pain that you see in the trees that you were photographing. And the other one is sensorial research. And I just quote a sentence from a paper that you recently wrote and that you shared with me. I quote, "Emotions and feelings often lead the way for making the visual work. Yet critical reflection and contextualization are equally important for providing a crucial framework." And this is really something that comes very close to my heart, as I'm a strong believer of the power of visual storytelling, and to insert there not only the facts, which should be straight, but also what is experienced there. And in this case, what is experienced there from the people in the village. And you are going to tell us about that, but also what you yourself experienced. And in some way you succeed to get that in your picture. And then we can also transfer that to the audience in the exhibition. So tell us this wonderful and sad story maybe as well of Frank that is depicted here in two pictures.
Okay, Frank is the only tree that I managed to photograph before it was being transplanted. This is actually quite significant because if you're photographing a person, you can ask this person to go here and there. But trees can't do that. They can only be at one place. So if I discover a tree that was transplanted, there's no way to find out how they were like before unless there were other pictures. I discovered Frank by chance while I was doing Mother River project. This village was actually my Y25 on the river, so just about 1/3 way in of the the river. It was a significant moment because I had traveled on the Tibetan plateau for 3 weeks. I had not seen many trees because it was still quite early in March, so the plateau was still fairly frozen, but the climate changed quite rapidly near where Frank was from. My driver and I, we walked into the village. We were so taken. The tree was so beautiful after not seeing anything green for 3 weeks. the life, and you can not only the life of the tree, but the people, their life was evolving around the tree. There were group of little kids playing cards very, very loudly. The dog was just, being a dog. There were 2 people talking, with their little backpack, their little basket backpack. But at the same time, we could see the city, the village was half demolished. You can see the building at the left-hand side corner. And the red slogan painted near the root of the tree says, "If you move earlier, your life will get stable earlier, you benefit earlier, you get rich earlier." So what's going on here? And so, we stuck around, we asked people. So yes, this is another hydroelectric dam on the Yangtze River, which was going to flood this village very soon. So that red slogan was there to persuade people to move. And that's why that one building already went. At that moment, my heart just sank. Because I had already been photographing trees in cities. And I asked myself, oh, what's going to happen to this tree? I was told the tree was 300 years old. You ask people, they say, I don't know. My grandma's grandma's house was here. We think the tree was already here before that house. So finally, someone said, we think it's about 300 years old. So I was dying to know what would happen to Frank. So the next trip I had in June that year. So 3 months later, I told myself to start from Y25 again, because I could have started from Y26. We drove to the village, or where we remember it was, but there was nothing there. Utterly nothing. There was no field, with crops, and no building, nothing. It's just really strange. Not even a hole in the ground to indicate where the tree was. So yeah, it was completely flattened. It was quite hard to take in. And again, we stuck around, you know, because I'm a native Chinese speaker, so we could get information. I also had this original picture with me. We asked people. And they said, oh, that tree, yes, we know. We had 4 century-old trees in the village. Together, they were sold for about 10,000 euros. And this one, by then I'd named it Frank. Don't ask me why, I don't know. And this one was sold to a nearby city, about an hour away by car. And the new owner was to build a 5-star hotel. So this was going to be the trophy. So Frank broke 2 cranes because it was so big and heavy. It was 70 tons after losing its crown and all the leaves. And it became quite a celebrity by the time it reached the new city, because everybody knew that tree created a lot of problems. It couldn't go around city corners, the street corners. Finally, we found it. I don't know if you can imagine my feeling after seeing how it was before. It was.
Yeah, it's also amazing because it's only 3 months, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a hard time to move because I think oh yeah, I can do it like this. It's only 3 months difference.
Yeah.
So it was cut, of course, to make it movable. And now, but did you see it afterwards? I mean, another few years later?
Yes, I did. So this was 2013. I waited around until the light became better because it was very sunny. And I took this picture and left. So to be honest, Frank was almost my motivation to continue forest because I really I needed to know what happened to it. So I came back, I looked for money and opportunities to go back. In 2017, I found the money and time. I managed to go back. I found the exact site. The city was built up, but Frank had gone down. He died in 2015. And so I photographed the empty site, empty of Frank, but otherwise it was quite busy. I felt aesthetically speaking, the final picture, for example, it was just a very topographic, observational picture. But I remember the day I got up at 4 to go there to wait for the light. And I knew it's meant to be like that. It's empty, but it's significant. So yeah, that's the whole story of Frank.
Yeah. And just to go, to go to another story right away, because this is
Regionen area.
Yeah, and the Frank story, of course, was about replanting a tree, and here it is. It's a new city, a new part of the city in Chongqing, and as quick as possible, some patches of nature should be installed, come up from the ground here, literally under this famous bridge, to serve as a little park, to go and walk and have some fun with families. And here also you did the method of repeat photography. So you started here quite early, 2011, 12, 14 already. And then you went back in 17 and made these pictures.
Yes.
Can you tell us also a little bit about this kind of method that you're using of the repetition of going somewhere, but then from more or less the same perspective?
Yeah. In a way, I feel repetition is never going to be a repetition because, for example, with photography, we all know you can never take the same picture twice. Something's always going to be different. And I found that through quite a lot of my obsessive repetition, I always find that if you give this subject enough time, by being with it for so long, you're going to find something new. This subject is going to reveal more to you. It's almost like let the story find me other than me trying to search for a story. So I think time in this is really important. You need to give it. It's like you know someone, perhaps most of the time you know them long enough to know who they really are. So for me, actually, reputation, all kind of this stubbornness to stick with the subject for a very long time. And you don't have to just hit the same thing. You can also look around. And then, for my research, the reputation over time is often a framework, because that gives me opportunities to read books, to talk to scientists, to play with stones, so I can have quite a holistic understanding. But with this particular area, that's really interesting, because I think the story of Frank was really a tragedy. But I also asked myself, while forest project went on, I thought, okay, apart from repeat photography of one particular tree, of one particular woodland, what else can I do? And because this whole movement really was tied up with urbanization, so I thought maybe I can also observe. I just stepped back a little. Rather than looking at individual trees, I'll look at the urban environment that's evolving around the trees. So Egongyan area became a case study for this purpose. I was fascinated by the topography of that area, because you have a very 3D approach. Anyone who's into large format photography, this is the sweet shop. It's very 3D, because the Yangtze River is nearby. That's the lowest part. And the Chongqing is a very hilly city. Right by the river, you have mountains. Therefore, you also have bridges to stand high. 2011, I went on this Yangtze River bridge. I think as many photographers working at the time, we were very taken by the intensity of China's urbanization. So I took this picture, and now I asked myself, what can I do with that? Often, my approach was not like I just knew from the very beginning, right, I'm going to do it for 5 times over 7 years. It's about sticking with it and kind of respond to what I find. And so 1 year later, when I went back, I just thought, well, I'm going to pop down to see what's going on underneath the bridge. And I realized it's a very expensive apartment area. If there's a swimming pool, that means it's very expensive. And the thing is, in those 7 years, I never saw any water in the swimming pool other than the rainwater. And really interestingly, everything around the swimming pool, all the trees, grasses, they were all like put in within a few months' time. So it's really a very much a constructed nature. And 2014, I literally just went beyond the swimming pool and to where the concrete columns were. And it was quite a deserted landscape, really, because they wiped everything, the existing community out, and started afresh again. So people have not totally moved back yet. So by the way, I think it's actually quite good, because when they were renewing the city, sometimes they persuaded the original residents to move out, but when apartments were built, they allowed them to come back. They would have apartment, a new one. But that area underneath the bridge was called a park, a city park. And that I found it very interesting, because it's a very interesting use of space. And then in 2017, I went back to the bridge. The change in 6 years. Wow. And it's really interesting to catch a picture like that while you're standing on a wobbly bridge, because every time when the lorry drove past me, the whole thing will shake. And also when you see the prints, you will know, there were people playing football in the field underneath the bridge. There was one lonely guy playing basketball. I had to wait until all these elements lined up, but also without the lorry. To make that picture. And then again, let's just drop down back to the park area. That picture with people dancing and kids playing, that was a total education for me, because at first I was so devastated for the fate of the trees. I was very negative of this whole urbanization movement. But when I saw urban scenes like this, because I also knew where it came from a blank canvas. You know, everything was wiped out and started again. People were brought back in, trees were planted, concrete forests were built. But guess what? Life does happen. And these little kiddies will remember these trees.
Mhm.
By today, this year, it's probably as tall as a column now. So I became a lot more hopeful or empathetic for, I suppose, for the forces of life, really. And I think, to be honest, this picture was a turning point for the narrative. Before that, I was pretty much crying for the trees. After this picture, I became more of visual storyteller. I would step back a lot more. I would observe, it's almost like the comedy and life itself, including humans and trees in the city. So that's the story of Gongyan Park. By the way, Gongyan in Chinese, I think it means geese on rock. Means geese. So I'm guessing, I haven't done my research. I'm guessing that perhaps has something to do with the fact that this was right by the Yangtze River. Maybe they did have a rock, or they did have a lot of geese. Let's hope that way.
Yeah. I just go to the next picture. And I find it wonderful how you explained this series, and also that it's a kind of turning point for your own opinion and view on what is happening, that you not only think, oh, this is all bad, but actually, yeah, I mean, people need some nature, and
yes,
they are also forced to go to the cities and to live there, to make money, to make a fortune, to improve their life. So but before I go to that, this is one of my absolute favorites of the whole series, as it's also the gold blanket that is wrapped around what is actually not one tree, but it's a suggestion to, or it's used to suggest that it's a thick tree already, but I think it's actually all young tree branches that are pulled together. And I'm so curious, because this was in 2017, and also after what you just said, I'm actually so hopeful that this tree is still there and became one big tree.
Yes.
Do we know, or? We
don't, actually, now you are talking, maybe I can ask a friend to
please do for me.
Have a look for us. But I have seen other fake oak trees that in the end merged together, the group of little trees.
Okay, so they survive by by finding a new community.
You know what you said about what's driving all this ultimately is our love of nature and our need to have it next to us. And I think we must not forget, it's not like, yes, we can make some money by selling trees, yes, but then the people need to buy them, and the reason they buy them is because they love them. So it's quite complicated. It's funny, when I saw this one, the hotel guard told me, yes, it's 1 year old. Was that, what do you mean? He said it's an old tree, it's a pretend old tree, 1 year old.
Pretend old tree, 1 year old. Wow. They need to come up with new names for it, indeed. But it's exactly like you say, and I think this also taps in what I already suggested a little bit, or addressed a little bit, and what I think you write it in your essay of your book, that you also see your project and following these trees and following let's say the travels of the trees as a metaphor for migration, which is of course happening on quite a big scale in China.
Yes.
And also migrants have to root again and find a new soul, find a new community. And in what sense was that like this metaphor for migration, for also people finding new grounds to live on? Was that was key for your project, or for the development of your project?
That's such an interesting question, because I think when I was doing forest, I did not realize that on that level. It's only after I completed forest, an American curator wrote an essay, and he said in the essay, without telling me, he said perhaps Yan Wang Preston's own history as a migrant helped her to see the, you know, the significance of this story. And I, you know, after 17 years living in England, I know my sense of identity is changing. So perhaps forest could be a very subtle reference point to, you know, the stories of human migrants, that in the way that they, yes, it often starts from quite a brutal displacement, but most of them will try to survive, and they are strong enough to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, now I am self, you know, a migrant living in England, and I know this has very much become a keyword for my current work, and that's not unconscious anymore, it's very conscious. So yeah, and yes, these guys are having a great time, aren't they, sleeping?
For sure. Yeah, but I like that you discover things while doing, but it also happens, or you get insights while doing, but it also happens because you take this time, because you allow yourself to take the time and to, you're not sure what you're waiting for, but it's it pays out, let's say, in the end, to take the time. And also, you know, if then other people of course reflect on it, but also for yourself to reflect on, you know, if you have closed down a project, to go back to it and feel what you have learned and take that in a new project. Hey, I just want to go to these two wonderful images because of the crazy colors, let's say, crazy color palette of the green. That's actually nets of biodegradable material that I think protect the former quarry. And then what we see, especially on the right one, is little trees that they plant. So this is a tree factory, let's say, because I believe they are put in some red artificial or semi-artificial soil that feeds them. But I also understood that there's quite a lot of water needed here to let them grow. Yeah, can you tell, because they are they, that was my question, are they to recover nature in this quarry, or are they also made for a new city nearby to be replanted again?
They're very much about recovering nature, which means conceptually it's connected to the tree part of the story. Towards the end of my photographic activities in Chongqing, because I limited my most of that project in one city, I started having more reflections on how can I say this the contradiction embedded in the color green.
Oh, sorry.
Because you know, green, we just say it's color of life, but actually in the era when you heard of this term greenwashing. So green can be so, or the meaning of it can be so easily exploited for so many things. So I started thinking more conceptually on the color green and how I can tackle that. And also I think I read stories like somewhere the whole quarry was covered by green paint just to appear green. You know, it's such a literal and poisonous take on the meaning of life. So I started looking for that kind of landscapes. And when I went to photograph Frank for the last time in 2017, I found it. And the color palette threw me off balance. Because, you know, in Chongqing, it's mainly green and gray. Green for trees, gray for concrete. With a tiny bit of red for the paint. But this, my word, I struggled for some time to kind of get used to it. And also the light was extremely different, sunny every day. It's a bit like southern Spain.
Yeah, because this is a very warm area in China, isn't it?
Yes.
Almost
yes,
desert-like.
really, yes, basically.
Yeah.
And but the scenes were so astonishingly I can say big and wild. So I couldn't help it. I went and explored it. Very quickly I realized it's all to do with this term called ecology recovery. So on top of reforesting cities, now you have ecology recovery in line with a policy. China actually still has it now. It's basically a direct translation is gold mountain, green mountains also a gold mountain. So it's a matter to say, we want to have nature. And following that, a lot of quarries were closed because they were deemed not very good for the environment. Yeah. And not only to close them, they also decided to recover ecology.
Yeah.
On the quarries. Here in Europe, a lot of quarries were left behind, for example, where I live, and they actually have become ecological hotspots for the very fact that the soils disturbed and nobody cared about them. So nature had a chance to rebuild itself. And they often result in we call it a recombinant ecology. So it's a very thriving and actually healthy ecology full of non-native and invasive species. Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, but yeah, there was no time to wait for that to happen because it can take centuries. And so these projects were done, say, in 6 months. A very large amount of money was spent. First, they would clear all the dangerous rocks away. And you can see the picture on the left, the tiny human figures. You can get a sense of how big the scene.
Yeah,
really,
that's amazing. Yeah.
So everything was covered by the green. It's because they have sprayed soil on any slope and edge that could hold a little bit soil. And then they cover it by this membrane to keep the soil in place until the grass, until the grass comes out. And so that's why it's called Ecology Recovery Project. And with that, they also, planted trees, sometimes small trees, sometimes big trees. I can tell you a secret, which is 2 years after that, I also went back there.
Hey.
Hey, no one knows. And that was really, really interesting. For example, most of the soil on the steep slope was just wasted. There was nothing growing.
Yeah. Okay. And that just slide away, I guess.
Yeah. And it's a dry area. Can you imagine how much money it will cost to run the water?
Yeah.
And so now there is a real ecology happening because these sites, according to my observation, many were abandoned. Some obviously were taken on to be turned into parks. But these two areas, particularly, they were abandoned, and I could see little grass going out, not the ones they planted. And visually, it was a total mess. It did not make nice pictures in a way, or at least I was unable to do it at the time. There was abandoned little water pool. I saw a frog in it. So that's kind of the story about the ecology recovery. To be honest, this was like the finishing point of forest, but the starting point of my investigation on the ecology in the UK.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. I felt already the associations between those, and it's wonderful how one project can evolve in the other. As you also told that forest, you discovered Frank while working on the Mother River, and that's a wonderful way to to continue your practice. It's almost 8 o'clock. And I think I might show this one as the last picture. We go a little bit back to the pane for the trees because of the nails here in the tree trunk. And I just wanted to ask you you did for sure address it, but I would find it still interesting to know a little bit, to have a little bit of more explanation about your position as indeed being a Chinese woman going back to China. And because a lot of Western photographers, as you also wrote, by the way, in your own paper, are of course going to China and follow the devastating effects of the industry on the environment. We all get those stories in the media. You already said, like, you know, it was also my opinions changed while doing the project. Is this also because you are from the country, so you have a different perspective, or you get different informations? Can you tell a little bit about that? What is your your stand?
That's probably because maybe a combination of reasons. I am Chinese, so I can dig into information that perhaps is a little harder if you don't speak Chinese. You know, I can't really pretend that I'm hopeful. That I'm a hopeful person that's for China and, you know, for the UK where I live now. So I feel there's already so much work done on the negative side of environmental transformation, not only in China, but globally. But how do we really get into the complexity of these things? I think that's like a bigger challenge for artists.
Yeah.
Because to discover these kind of complexities, it involves a lot of investment in research, but also it asks the artist to perhaps abandon his or her prejudice. And sometimes you don't realize you have that prejudice. So you know, this picture really says that. And so I think I always, it doesn't matter, you know, if it's Mother River. I wanted to tell a multi-layered story about China's reality. It's the same with forest. You know, for me, I think the most important part of forest as a whole project, not individual picture, is you open the book at the beginning, you see one thing. When you reach the end, you see something totally different. It's not a repetitive story, although I was repetitive.
Yeah.
You know, it opens up, you know, it gives hope. Nature is going to come back and it will stay. And, you know, the environment, yes, it suffered. We have seen that, but it always will have a chance.
Yeah. I think that's such a beautiful ending of our talk, and I can't say it better. And this is, and also that I mean, I said that was the last picture, but I actually thought we should end with this because there's exactly that optimism, and it's something against what is going on. We see all the cities and the infrastructure that is needed, but if we use those little pieces for our food, for flowers, for just being in the green, in green areas, which is really healthy. That's also a positive note. So I would like to thank you very much for this wonderful talk. Let me see if I can stop sharing. I think I did. Yes, I managed. And I think we can close the talk.
Yes.
Or
Yasmin? Yes, thank you so much, Iris Sikking and Yan Preston. And again, Heidi Marwig and the Confucius Institute. It was really interesting, I think, and I learned a lot about your project, but also I think it also fits so well to Iris Biennale. Of course, she selected you for a reason, but also what you pointed out, taking in the different perspectives is really the core of from where I stand. So it was just so beautiful to hear it from you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And yes, for the last little moment, I want to point out our new next online event in collaboration with the Confucius Institute. It will be on the 25th of April with Yu Fan Lu, and she will present her project Make Me Beautiful, also again with Iris Sikking. So you're all very much invited to this. And yes, now I want to close. And thank you again, Yan Wang Preston, Iris Sikking, and Heidi Marbeek. And yeah, have a beautiful evening.
Yes,
And thank you, audience, for being here.
Yes. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a
Bye.
good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.